The rain had been falling over the quiet village of Ashbourne, Derbyshire, since late afternoon. By 10 o'clock, I was standing in my kitchen, watching droplets race down the window while a kettle hummed behind me. I had moved into the old stone cottage only 3 weeks earlier, hoping for peace after a difficult year. My name is Daniel, and at 36, I had become accustomed to living alone. The cottage belonged to my late uncle, who had left it to me unexpectedly. Across the narrow lane stood another beautiful cottage, where my neighbor, Sophie, lived. I had noticed her several times, but we'd barely exchanged more than polite greetings. That evening, however, everything changed. Just as I was about to turn off the kitchen light, someone knocked firmly on my front door. I frowned at the clock. It was almost 11. When I opened it, Sophie stood there wearing a thick white robe, rain dripping from her dark hair onto her shoulders. She looked slightly embarrassed, then smiled. "You're not getting in that hot tub alone." I stared at her, completely confused. "I'm sorry, what?" She laughed softly and pointed toward my back garden. "Your uncle's hot tub. You told me earlier you were going to try it tonight. Remember?" I suddenly remembered mentioning it while we were carrying boxes from my car 2 days earlier. "I was joking," I said. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "You don't look like a man who jokes very often." Before I could answer, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Come on," she said. "I've brought wine." I looked at the bottle in her hand, then at her robe. "Is this normal behavior in Derbyshire?" I asked. "Only when neighbors are being boring," she replied, laughing. Somehow, within minutes, I found myself following her into the garden. The hot tub was steaming beneath the cloudy sky, surrounded by small solar lights. Sophie had apparently already switched everything on earlier that evening. I changed into swim shorts while she waited outside, and soon we were sitting opposite each other in the warm water, listening to the rain strike the wooden fence. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though, felt strangely peaceful. Sophie eventually told me she had lived in the village for almost 8 years. She worked as a primary school teacher in Nottingham and had moved here after her marriage ended. I hadn't expected that confession. She looked cheerful most of the time, but there was something tired behind her smile. I told her about my own year, about losing my job in London and then my uncle. She listened without interrupting, simply swirling the wine in her glass. "Maybe that's why you came here," she said quietly. "Not because you wanted the cottage. Maybe you needed somewhere nobody knew your old life." Her words caught me off guard. I looked at her through the steam. "Maybe you're right." The rain became heavier, drumming against the garden fence. Sophie smiled and pulled her robe tighter around herself when she climbed out to fetch another towel. Suddenly, the outdoor lights flickered. The garden went completely dark. "Sophie," I called. "I'm here," she answered from somewhere near the back door. A second later, I heard a sharp crash. I climbed out immediately and ran toward her. She was sitting on the wet paving stones, holding her ankle. "Don't move," I said. "Are you hurt?" She tried to laugh. "Only my pride." But when she attempted to stand, her face tightened with pain. I helped her inside, wrapped her ankle with a towel, and made her tea while the storm continued outside. By midnight, the rain had slowed. Sophie sat on my sofa, her injured ankle resting on a cushion. She looked around the cottage and smiled. "You know, this place feels different now," he said beside her. "Different how?" She looked directly at me. "Less lonely." I didn't know what to say. Neither did she. For the first time since arriving in Ashbourne, I realized I wasn't simply looking for a quiet place. Maybe I had been waiting for someone to knock on the door. The next morning, Sophie returned with breakfast and an apology for the previous night's chaos. She brought fresh pastries from the village bakery and placed them on my kitchen table. "Peace offering," she announced. I smiled. "For breaking your ankle?" She rolled her eyes. "For invading your hot tub." Over the following weeks, our friendship quietly became something more. We walked through the countryside, shared Sunday lunches, and spent evenings talking beside the fireplace. Sometimes we didn't even speak. We simply enjoyed being together. One cold Saturday, Sophie stood beside the garden gate and looked toward the hot tub. "Think we should try again?" she asked. I laughed. "Only if you promise not to fall." She smiled. "Only if you promise not to let me." Months later, when spring finally arrived, I realized something important. Sophie hadn't come to my door because she wanted a hot tub companion. She had knocked because she sensed that I was lonely. And sometimes, the person who unexpectedly walks into your life isn't there to change your plans. They're there to change your heart. What began with a rainy night, a white robe, and an awkward invitation became the most unexpected chapter of my life. I had moved to Derbyshire searching for solitude, but instead, I found a home, and beside it, the woman who had been brave enough to knock.